Hey there, you guys. Welcome to the show. Today, I want to talk about something very special, something that is a problem that I've been dealing with my entire life, and I think it's a problem that a lot of people struggle with in one way or another. And the problem I'm talking about today is the problem of compulsive thinking. And compulsive thinking, it can mask itself in many ways, and it can show itself in our lives in a number of different forms. And some of those forms could be things like obsessive compulsive disorder, things like perfectionism, shiny object syndrome, things like ruminating, right? Ruminating is when you constantly think about bad things that have happened in the past or anxieties you have about the future. And whenever you start to feel happy or start to think about something that is positive or optimistic, your brain will immediately switch back to the negative thing and tell you that you should be focusing on your fear instead. That's what ruminating is. Now, there's a lot of ways that compulsive thought affects us, right? And I think obviously the first way that it affects us is emotionally. And when you're constantly thinking about things, when you're constantly questioning things, when you're not really sure, when you feel like the situation is probably more negative than it is, that is going to have a consequence on your emotions. And for most people, compulsive thinking is a bad thing. There are lots of people who compulsively think on different levels and different terms. People who are always working and constantly solving problems and constantly trying to forecast the future and create predictions, that can be a useful skill. But for a lot of us who do not have complete control over the emotional aspects of our mind, for those of us who are not quite confident as we need to be, quite as secure as we need to be, or not quite as joyful as we need to be, people who are depressed and anxious, compulsive thoughts will lead to an amplification of those negative emotions in most situations. So we have to understand that compulsive thinking is kind of like a blessing and a curse, right? Because when you think as much as someone who has compulsive thought, you're probably very creative. You're probably imagining lots of new things. You're thinking about problems. You're doing complex problem solving in your head all day long. But what we have to also understand are the negative consequences, right? The emotional impact, the drain on your energy, the drain on your willpower. Because even if your compulsive thinking is a constant background noise, like it is for me, I'm constantly thinking about what kinds of problems I should be anticipating in my business. I'm thinking about my clients. I'm thinking about the problems my clients are facing. And even when I'm not working, sometimes when I'm just watching a movie or if I'm cooking, I'm thinking about one of my clients and how I can fix their problem and what they're doing wrong and what they might be going through. And I'm always problem solving in my head. And this does make me a good coach. It makes me a good entrepreneur in some ways, but in other ways, it sabotages my business. It drains my energy. Even though it's just background noise, it still requires mental energy. You guys have to understand that your brain uses a lot of calories. Your brain consumes a ton of calories. It has to. Humans have huge brains. It's what makes us special in the animal kingdom. And those brains require a ton of fuel. And every time you feel an emotion, every time you have a thought, every time your brain is solving a problem, every time you have a reflex, right? Maybe you see a snake and you jump back. Like all of those impulses are electrical currents in your brain that are firing, right? It's firing a nerve impulse. And that requires calories. That requires energy. So all of these thoughts you're having all day long are consuming calories. It's draining your energy. Okay? So compulsive thought is a resource-heavy process that a lot of us have very little control over, and a lot of us aren't paying enough attention to the consequences and the effects that compulsive thinking is having in our life. So I want to talk about this today a little bit more because yesterday I had a session with my therapist, and like I always say, everyone should probably get a therapist at some point in their life. It's not because you're broken, and just because you think you're not broken doesn't mean you don't need a therapist. I think therapy is a great way to just talk about your life to a trained professional who can give you objective feedback. So I highly recommend getting a therapist. I've had a therapist for a number of years now. But I went to see my therapist, and we talked about a lot of things, but we did end up talking about compulsive thought. And at one point during the session, I asked her, I think we were talking about irritability, and I asked her, I said, is there any books on this that you would recommend that I read? Do you have any suggestions? And she said, no. And I looked at her and I said, no. And she said, you need to stop reading. You need to stop thinking so much. And I said, okay, so I should stop absorbing new information? And she said, absolutely. She said, you have a compulsion and you need to get out of your head. Sometimes more information and more thinking is not the answer. And I sat there and I actually took about 30 seconds to process that, because I've heard that in several different forms before in my life. There's a quote somewhere I have written somewhere in my office. I don't even remember who says it. I'd have to find it to tell you. But it's a simple quote, and it goes like this: sometimes thinking is not the best answer. That was the quote. And when I read it the first time, it was a few months ago when I found that, I was like, that's true. Like, I could probably utilize this aphorism in my life. I think this would support me in my goals. It would support my self-development, because I know that I do think too much. I'm a little perfectionistic sometimes. And, sometimes thinking is not the best answer. And I've also been reading a lot of Eckhart Tolle lately. If you've never read the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, in fact, I talked a lot about this book in episode 5, I believe, with Kurt William Shivitz from Conscious Modern Living. If you have not checked out episode 5 yet, I highly, highly recommend you do. The interview with Kurt was amazing. He is one of the most profound people I've ever met in my life. He is a coach that helps people clear their mind and find inner peace and happiness and joy. And he is an absolute wizard at what he does. But he recommended this book to me a while ago. And since I bought the book on Audible, I have listened to it 5 times. I'm currently listening to it the 6th time. It's called The Power of Now. And in that book, Eckhart basically tells you that the key to happiness, right, the key to joy, well, the first thing he does is he explains the difference between happiness and joy. And he explains that happiness is a fleeting sensation. It's an emotion, whereas joy is the natural internal state of being. Joy is being present. When you're in the moment, when you're conscious and you are paying attention to what's happening around you, and you're not identifying with your thoughts, your compulsive thoughts, that is a state of joy. It's kind of like the flow state, if you've ever heard about that, but it's slightly different. I really recommend you read the book or listen to it. Listening to it's even better, in my opinion. But he says that the key to unlocking your joy, to unlocking consciousness and mindfulness, is to disassociate yourself from your thoughts. He describes it this way: when people experience thoughts, they treat the thoughts as if they came from themselves. It came from their consciousness. It came from their brain. People identify very heavily with their brain. But Eckhart tells us that instead of looking at thoughts as if they were our own, we should instead observe them as a third party. And this is where things get really interesting, because if you have lots of compulsive thoughts, if your brain is constantly running background processes, and you're constantly talking to yourself and thinking about the future, you're anxious, you're depressed, you're thinking about the past, you're predicting things, you're planning things, like constantly. I'm a compulsive list maker. If you're like that, you associate yourself with those thoughts. And so all day long, your ego, your identity is being yanked around, back and forth, pushed down, pushed up, back and forward, because you're having all of these different thoughts. These cycles and these processes are running in your head. And all day long, your identity is shifting and changing and trying to identify with that thought and trying to agree with this one and trying to deflect that one. And you're constantly having to subconsciously change and transform and evolve and adapt based on all of these thoughts in your head. It's tiring. It's exhausting. It will make you depressed. It will make you anxious. Take my word for it. If you are a compulsive thinker, it's dangerous. And you need to rein this in because it will slowly corrode your identity. It will corrode your sense of self, right? So when we observe our thoughts, here's what we do. Now, in a typical moment, I might be standing at my desk just like this. I might be working on my YouTube channel. I might be working on one of my courses, creating slides. I might be editing a video. But in my head, I'm focusing on what I'm doing, but there's another part of my brain that I can hear. It's very much present. It's there, it's loud, and it is thinking to itself, how many sales have you made this week? What about your one client, Joe? How's he doing? Do you think he finished his funnel, or do you need to message him a third time and remind him to get on it? What about your client? What about your client, Stephanie? What's she doing this week? She hasn't messaged you in a week. What do you think she's doing? Do you think she's still struggling with that self-doubt? Do you think she's still trying to redo the front page of her website instead of taking phone calls? Do you need to message her too? And you're thinking about all these things. What am I going to have for dinner? What time should I work out today? Am I hungry right now? Did I eat enough food? If I work out in an hour, am I going to have enough food in my stomach? Did I eat enough carbs? Should I go outside today? It's pretty sunny out. And all day long, that's what's going on. That's what's going on. And you're trying to pay attention to all of these things. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it very hard to focus on your work. It's going to be very hard to complete the task in front of you that actually needs to get done because all of these background thoughts, this background chatter is taking up your energy. And here's what Eckhart says about that. He says, thinking about things that are going to happen in the future is so pointless because the future never comes. You're only in the present, and you are only ever in the present. You never get to go into the future. You only get to deal with things in the present moment. If you have a dentist appointment in an hour, thinking about it right now is not going to allow you to talk to the dentist, to get your teeth checked out, to park your car, to make sure your insurance goes through. You can't do any of that right now. You can't do it in the future, but in an hour, you'll get to do it in the present. And so thinking about all of these things that need to happen in the future is pointless. Because the future will become the present when it needs to, when it's meant to, when it will. And when you are in that present moment, you will have the same exact tools that you have right now in this present moment to deal with that present moment. But you do not have any tools that allow you to deal with the future in the present. You never will. It's the same as thinking about the past. You obviously can't deal with the past. The past was the present moment at one point, but it no longer is. It's gone. It doesn't exist. The past exists as much as the future does. You only have the present moment. And so running all these processes in your head, you're not in the moment. You're not focused on your work. You're not focused on the task at hand because you're focusing on something that isn't real. And when you focus on something that isn't real and you identify those thoughts with yourself and you claim ownership of those thoughts, you're indirectly claiming ownership of the future, which guess what? Nobody owns the future. You only own your own present moment. And if you try to get your ego, your identity, to shift with an ownership of the future, ownership of something that you don't have, all of a sudden, you no longer own part of your ego. You no longer own part of your identity because part of your identity is associated with your thoughts about the future that you cannot and will not ever have. So staying present allows us to stay present with our identity, to stay present with ourselves, and to almost let go of the ego. In fact, Eckhart says enlightenment is complete abandonment of the ego. It's not that you forget who you are. It's not that you stop trying to be unique. You stop trying to be what makes you you. I am still Andrew Wuellner. I'm still Coach Andrew. I still have my identity. I still have my strange quirks and my personality traits and my fears and the things that make me happy. I'm still Coach Andrew. But I don't live as if I am that identity. I don't try to be that ego. I try to live in the moment and experience what's in front of me, because the background noise is not contributing to my identity. It's not adding something that's constructive or useful, and it's not going to help me. When I think too much about the future or the past, it actually takes away. It takes away my energy. It takes away part of my identity, and it takes part of me and puts it in a place where I can no longer control it. And I want to have as much control over myself as possible. So you do that by staying conscious, staying in the present moment. And when those background conversations, when that internal dialogue is running off the clock, instead of trying to identify with it and to rationalize it and understand it and analyze it and see if it's true and argue with yourself, instead of doing those things, instead, simply observe the thought and just look at it, acknowledge it, don't judge it, and just let it float. Let it float away. Because right now, I'm recording a podcast right now. If you're listening to it, this happened in the past. But in the present moment, as I am talking to this microphone, this is what I'm focusing on. Right now, I could be thinking about the fact that a minute ago, I heard my dog start to bark. And I could start getting a little bit angry because I don't want my dog barking in the background of this podcast, right? But I observed that thought and I let it float by because I can't deal with the dog right now. I'm in the basement. The dog is upstairs. If I'm going to deal with the dog, I'll do it when I go upstairs. Now, this takes a lot of practice. And you have a lot of different thoughts that go through your head on a daily basis, in all likelihood, with a lot of different implications, a lot of different emotions and strings attached. You have to come from a place of empathy and self-love and a desire to understand what your mind is doing, right? When you try this, when you start practicing this, you have to come in open-minded. And when you hear the background noise, when you start feeling anxious, when you start feeling nervous or stressed, and you're thinking about all these different things, just sit back and let the thoughts go by like a train. Each thought is a different cart on that train, and you're just watching the train go by. You're observing the thoughts. You're not judging them. You're not analyzing them. You're not pulling them in and holding them close and taking them deep and trying to figure out why you thought that and if it's true and if it makes sense and what you should do. None of that. You observe the thought. You go, that's cute, brain. That's nice, brain. Ooh, brain, that one wasn't so nice. I'm definitely going to let that one float by. And just let the thoughts go. Just let them go. And a way to make this easier is to focus on your sensations, right? So focus on your feelings. Focus on what you're observing. If you're watching the video version of this podcast on the YouTube channel, look at the video right now. There's a poster behind me that says hustle. There's a wind chime. There's a suit of armor behind me. It's kind of shiny because there's lights hitting it. There's a blue mosaic lamp hanging next to my bookshelf. There's all these different colors and sensations. Focus on the sound of my voice. What else do you hear? Do you hear your air conditioning or your heating? Do you hear cars outside? Is your dog barking? Focus on your senses. That will bring you into the present moment because you can't sense anything from the future. You can only imagine it. You don't actually get to see something or hear something from the future. It's all in your head. But the things that are in front of you right now are real. These are real sensations. And you can have these because they're here, unlike your thoughts. So when you start practicing mindfulness, it's going to be hard at first. It's going to take some getting used to. In fact, if you're listening to this and if what I have said so far sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend you go read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And there's another shorter version of the book called Practicing the Power of Now. And that book is more like guided meditations. And I highly recommend you get the audiobook version of that one and just listen to it. Go walk at the park, sit on a chair. And this will help you practice these things. But compulsive thought has pros and cons, like we already said. It's going to make you a great problem solver, but it's also going to drain your energy and your willpower, and it will distract you from focusing on your work. So being mindful will allow you to distance yourself from your compulsive thoughts. It will allow you to find peace in the moments where you need it most. And when you're having lots of negative thoughts, automatic negative thoughts, negative feedback cycles, when you're ruminating, being present is going to allow you to step outside of that cycle. It's going to help you recenter your energy and stay positive and stay focused and get out of the compulsive thinking. That's why this is powerful. When you have problems to solve in your business, when your clients need your help, when you're trying to figure out how your day's going to go, maybe it's the night before Monday and you're trying to plan your week out, your thought process can be helpful. But you have to understand that when you're problem solving and when you're being constructive and productive, that is not compulsive thinking. There's the difference. Compulsive thinking is involuntary. Planning and constructive thought and analyzing and doing business and using critical thinking and rational thought and logic to solve problems that are real in the present moment, that's conscious thinking. That is not compulsive thinking. So that's the difference. And you have to understand that in order to make sense of everything I just said. So practice mindfulness, practice being present and observing your thoughts, and this will help you have better control over the things you think about. And that information will allow you to identify which thoughts were actually consciously made and which thoughts were automatic negative thoughts. And the more you practice this, the more present you become, the better you get at observing your thoughts and disassociating yourself from them, the less compulsive thinking you'll do, and the more effective your conscious thinking will become. You'll be able to focus because those automatic compulsive thoughts will no longer be there as an obstruction. So anyways, you guys, I really hope that this episode helped. I really only scratched the surface, but I wanted to share some of the takeaways, the big takeaways from therapy and from the books I've been reading with you guys, because this is really powerful stuff, right? I've been an entrepreneur for over 3 years now. I've been a coach for almost 8, and I'm still learning amazing things. Like this seems like something that really is incredibly basic, and it seems like something that should be taught everywhere. Maybe it should be taught in school. I feel like more people should be talking about this, but the truth is I've never heard about Eckhart Tolle or his philosophy or mindfulness in this way until a few months ago when I started reading that book. So I want to share this with you guys because I know that a lot of the stuff that I know and a lot of stuff that I've read and learned over the years is not commonplace, and not all of my listeners and watchers have the same information I do. So you guys have to remember that too. The things that you know, your unique experiences and stories and skills are very useful to a large number of people out there. So if you want to take this particular skill further, purchase the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I highly recommend getting the partner book, Practicing the Power of Now, with it and reading them both. They're both incredibly helpful. If you want some more insight right now, go check out episode number 5 with Kurt Shivitz. That was an amazing interview. He's an expert on this type of stuff, and we had some really good conversation about mindfulness and emotions in that episode. So go check it out. But as always, I want to thank you guys for watching the Seek and Clear podcast. It's always a pleasure having you guys here. If you enjoy the episode, make sure you listen to some of the other episodes. If you're on the YouTube channel, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, leave a like. Let me know that you're enjoying this podcast and that the content is on track. Leave a comment and let me know what other kinds of things you want to hear about. Let me know if you have guests that you'd like to recommend to come on the show. I've got the next 3 weeks booked out, but starting in November, I have room for some more people. So please send your suggestions my way and send your book suggestions my way. Let me know what you want to hear about on this podcast. Send me your questions. I'll do a Q&A. And that's it, you guys. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, the rest of your day. We will talk in the next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Seek and Clear podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want more of it, you can watch it on the YouTube channel over at Andrew Wuellner, and you can also listen to it on the major podcasting platforms, anywhere podcasts are found. You can support the channel by subscribing to the YouTube channel, downloading it, sharing it, showing it to your friends. All of that is greatly appreciated. I love the support. It shows me that you guys are getting something from this podcast, and I will continue to do it as long as that is the case. But if subscribing or sharing doesn't feel like enough for you and you want to do more to support the channel, you can go to my website, andrewwuellner.com, and check out what I do, what I offer, see if you might be a good fit for one of my coaching programs or my courses. And you can also go to andrewwuellner.com/resources to see all of my special offers. On this page, I have links that will take you to some of my favorite products and services that I personally use, that I personally love, and I would highly recommend you guys use in your lives to help you improve your quality of life or your quality of business. For example, if you are an entrepreneur or a business owner who sells a service or a product online, you need to be using sales funnels. And if you're using sales funnels, you need to be using ClickFunnels, because ClickFunnels allows you to build the largest number of high quality funnels. You can build websites, membership sites, webinars, VSLs, opt-in pages. All of it's possible, and it integrates with all of your favorite technology, your payment processors, your autoresponders, Zapier, everything. The customer service is second to none, and ClickFunnels has a perfect track record of being an amazing software. In fact, my entire website, andrewwuellner.com, is built on ClickFunnels. So if you want to see what it can do, just look around my website. I've used just about every integration that's possible. But if you go to andrewwuellner.com/resources, you will see a link for a free 14-day trial of ClickFunnels. If you join using my link, it supports me, it supports the channel, and I will also support you by sending you free to download my very best templates from my own marketing campaigns, including webinar funnels, homepage funnels, and opt-in lead generation funnels. I will also give you a free 5 to 10 minute video audit of your website and funnels when they're done. This is normally something I only do with my one-to-one paying clients. But if you use my affiliate link, you build some funnels, you build your website, all you have to do is email me, send me the link. I will see that you are one of my affiliates, and I will check out your branding, your copywriting. I'll look at your funnel, I'll look at your website, and I will film a video and send it back to you and let you know exactly what I think, what you can improve, what I love. And I will do everything I can to support you and your online business, because you guys are supporting me and I appreciate you that much. So please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for sharing, for watching this podcast. Go to andrewwuellner.com/resources to see more ways that you can help support me and improve your own life. And I will see you guys in the next episode of the Seeking Clear podcast. Take care.